Hello everyone, Mr. Lipchick here, and our segment of instruction today is on the three branches of government. First, the legislative branch, or Congress, was created in Article 1 of the Constitution. It created two legislative bodies, a House of Representatives to be popularly elected, and a Senate to be elected by the House. Both have about equal powers, and the founders of the Constitution believed that Congress would become the most important branch of government. The Senate is now popularly elected, but initially it was elected by the House. The founders, however, feared that Congress might abuse its powers as Parliament had done while the colonies were governed under England. It therefore gave Congress expressed or enumerated powers. This meant that Congress only had the powers that were given to it in the Constitution. There are 18 enumerated powers, or numbered powers, given to Congress in Section 8 of Article 1 of the Constitution. 5 enumerated powers deal with economic legislation. The power to levy taxes, the power to borrow money, the ability to regulate commerce or business, the ability to coin money, and the power to punish counterfeiters. Counterfeiting was a very widespread crime back then. Today it is much more rare because of the technology that we have. So this was a major problem in the early U.S., and it was punishable by death. 7 of the enumerated powers deal with the nation's defense. The power to punish piracy. We kind of laugh about that, but in these times, piracy was widespread. We didn't have the technology to know where pirates were, and they would, sail along the coast and attack ships, especially around North Africa. So this was an important power. Power to declare war. Power to raise and support armed forces, that is Army and Navy and Marine Corps. To provide for an Army and a Navy, and today the other branches, the Air Force. To regulate the Army and the Navy, and to call forth the militia, the National Guard or reserves. It takes an act of Congress to mobilize them, to send them overseas, as was done with the war in Iraq and Afghanistan. And to organize the militia, that is, to create the National Guards and reserves and regulate them. Other enumerated powers that are given to Congress include the power to naturalize citizens, that is, to give somebody citizenship who is not a citizen, establish post offices, secure patents and copyrights, establish courts, and govern the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. The final enumerated power is the most controversial that Congress has. It is known as the Elastic Clause of the Constitution. This gives Congress the power to make all laws necessary and proper to carry out its expressed powers contained in Article 1. Basically, it means they can, stretch it a little bit to give them the power to carry out their laws. It has been historically interpreted to mean that Congress should have broad lawmaking powers. Congress began as a relatively small body that met only periodically to decide on laws. To serve in Congress, you had to be wealthy enough to support yourself while serving. Usually, only the wealthy and powerful were elected. As the nation grew, however, Congress changed. Now senators and representatives receive a salary and serve full-time in Washington, D.C. The Executive Branch. The Executive Branch is described in Article 2 of the Constitution. Because of the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, the founders wanted a strong presidency. They feared mass democratic movements that would redistribute property, commonly known as mob rule. There was a revolution going on in France, which they were very afraid of. And the powers of the presidency are vaguely described and open to much interpretation, and this allows the president to act on behalf of the nation when necessary. The founders believed that the president could hold the actions of Congress in check. The president has the power to do the following: fire officials in the executive branch, Secretary of State, Treasury, etc., make agreements with foreign nations, take emergency action to save the nation. None of these powers are specifically mentioned in the Constitution, however. Article 2 defines some of the specific powers of the President. The President is the Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces and state militias when called into service. The President appoints the heads of the executive departments. The President can pardon people convicted of federal crimes, except those who are impeached, or reduce their jail sentences or fines. The President can make treaties with the advice and consent of the Senate, and can appoint ambassadors, federal court judges, and other top officials with the consent of the Senate. The President can deliver the State of the Union message to Congress and send other messages to Congress from time to time. The President can call Congress into special session when necessary, and meets with the heads of states, ambassadors, and other foreign officials, and commissions all military officers. When I received my commission in the Army, it was signed by the President, or at least had a facsimile of the President's signature, and ensures that laws passed by Congress are faithfully executed. The presidency has changed dramatically since Washington first assumed office in 1789. Washington refused to make presidential appointments based upon friendship or family ties, and was careful to make honest and above-board decisions, as he knew he was setting precedents for future presidents. The government of the time was simple and small, giving Washington much of the time to himself. The president was not as powerful as the president is today. Historically, the power of the presidency has grown throughout the history of the country. Today, the president's responsibilities are far greater than they were in Washington's time. The presidency has also grown in power over time. During the Civil War, Lincoln used his emergency powers to imprison people without trial, suspended habeas corpus. And other presidents would expand the power of the presidency by responding to other national emergencies. Judicial Branch. Article 3 of the Constitution creates the judicial branch of government. It is considered the weakest of all the branches. It lacks the ability to enforce its decisions. Supreme Court justices have lifelong appointments. And it kind of separates them from political pressure when they get that lifetime appointment. The jurisdiction or power of this branch covers all the federal courts whose power derives from the Constitution and federal laws. It does not have jurisdiction over state courts whose power derives from state constitution and state laws. Federal courts handle cases involving federal issues and maritime issues. That means those occurring at sea. An example would be trying a person for kidnapping, as it violates a federal law. The judicial branch grew in power over the years because of many landmark cases. In Marbury v. Madison in 1803, Chief Justice John Marshall announced the Judiciary Act of 1789 was unconstitutional. The power to rule laws unconstitutional became known as judicial review. Because the court does not have the power to enforce its decisions, it is sometimes ignored by the President, or Congress passes new laws to counteract its decisions. There are shared powers of the three branches. Legislative power is shared between the President and Congress. The President proposes laws and budgets that the Congress approves or votes against. Sometimes the Congress is in conflict with the President over the way in which passed laws are interpreted and enforced. Sometimes, because of political parties, Congress gives too much power to the President when passing proposed laws, or causes gridlock when an opposing party is in control. Congress has the power to limit the jurisdiction of the Supreme Court. Congress has been reluctant to do so for fear of upsetting the system of checks and balances. Congress can create federal or lower federal courts, and the President has, in our nation's history, ignored the decisions of the Supreme Court on occasion. When the Indian Removal Act was passed, or when the Supreme Court ruled the Indian Removal Act unconstitutional, President Jackson ignored the ruling. He said about Justice Marshall, "Marshall has his ruling, and I'll let him enforce it." And the result was the Trail of Tears. Okay, that just concludes our discussion on the three branches. Thank you for your attendance, and I look forward to seeing you in the live lessons. Have a great day.